Gunfire is once again echoing along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Border clashes, airstrikes, accusations of supporting militant groups. In early 2026, tensions between the two countries reached their most dangerous level in years. Pakistan says its army is responding to attacks carried out by militants who, according to Islamabad, are finding shelter on Afghan territory. Afghan authorities respond with a different accusation. They say the strikes violate Afghanistan's sovereignty and accuse Pakistan of escalating the conflict. What began as a series of border incidents quickly turned into open military confrontation. In February 2026, Pakistan's defense minister said that the two countries are effectively in a state of open war. But the tension between Afghanistan and Pakistan did not begin today. Its roots go much deeper, into the history of a border that divided one people, into decades of wars in the region, into political decisions whose consequences are still being felt today. To understand why relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan have reached the brink of war, we need to go back and examine how this conflict first began. Tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan escalated sharply in the second half of 2025. During the autumn, a series of attacks targeted Pakistani military posts in the border regions. One of the most serious incidents occurred in October 2025, when militants killed several Pakistani soldiers in the Orakzai district. Pakistan responded almost immediately. Pakistani aircraft carried out strikes against targets inside Afghanistan, including areas in the provinces of Paktika and Khost, and according to some reports, locations closer to Kabul. For the region, this marked a significant escalation. The strikes did not remain limited to border zones. They reached deeper into Afghan territory. Afghan authorities condemned the attacks as a violation of their sovereignty and accused Pakistan of causing civilian casualties. In response, Afghan forces began reinforcing their military presence along the Durand Line, the border separating the two countries. Clashes soon erupted in several areas along the frontier. Both sides reported casualties inflicted on the other, but the numbers varied widely in official statements. By early 2026, the situation entered a new phase. In February, Pakistan's defense minister declared that Islamabad's patience had run out and that relations between the two countries had effectively reached a state of open war. Shortly afterward, the Pakistani military announced the launch of operations against targets inside Afghanistan. But to understand why relations between these two neighboring states have reached this point, it is necessary to go much further back, to the events that laid the foundations of this conflict more than a century ago. To understand why the conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan has lasted for decades, we have to go back to the end of the 19th century. In 1893, the British colonial administration in India drew a border between British India and Afghanistan. This boundary became known as the Durand Line, named after the British diplomat Mortimer Durand, who helped negotiate the agreement. The main problem with this border was that it ignored the ethnic structure of the region. The Durand Line cut directly through lands where Pashtun tribes had lived for centuries. As a result, one part of the Pashtun population ended up inside Afghanistan, while another part found itself on a territory that would later become Pakistan. When Pakistan emerged in 1947 after the partition of British India, it inherited this border. But the Afghan government never officially recognized the Durand Line as an international boundary. Leaders in Kabul argued that the agreement signed in 1893 had been imposed under pressure and should not determine modern state borders. For Pakistan, however, the Durand Line is the legitimate national frontier. This disagreement has remained unresolved for more than a century. Today, many of the border clashes between the two countries take place along this very line. But the border itself is only part of the problem. The deeper tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan began to take shape during the wars that reshaped the entire region in the second half of the 20th century. In the second half of the 20th century, Afghanistan found itself at the center of several major conflicts that reshaped the balance of power across the region. In 1979, the Soviet Union sent troops into Afghanistan, beginning a war that would last nearly a decade. Pakistan played a key role in this conflict. Large camps for Afghan refugees were established on its territory. At the same time, Pakistan became a major channel through which international support was delivered to armed groups known as the Mujahideen. Pakistani intelligence services acted as one of the main intermediaries in coordinating this support. When Soviet forces withdrew in 1989, Afghanistan did not become stable. Instead, the country descended into civil war. In the mid-1990s, a new force appeared on the political scene, the Taliban movement. Pakistan viewed the Taliban as a potential partner that could stabilize Afghanistan and create a friendly government in Kabul. Within Pakistan's military thinking, this idea became known as strategic depth. The concept was simple. A friendly government in Afghanistan could provide Pakistan with greater security in the event of a conflict with India. But over time, this strategy began producing unexpected consequences. Some of the militant networks that had emerged during the Afghan wars gradually turned their attention toward Pakistan itself. And today, one of the main drivers of the modern conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan is a group known as Tehrik-e Taliban Pakistan, or simply TTP. Despite the similar name, TTP is a separate organization, distinct from the Afghan Taliban. Its primary objective is to fight against the Pakistani state and establish its own Islamic system within Pakistan. The group emerged in 2007 and quickly became one of the most dangerous militant forces in the region. Over the years, TTP has carried out dozens of attacks on military bases, police stations, and government institutions across Pakistan. After the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan in 2021, the situation began to change rapidly. Many TTP fighters moved into Afghan territory, where, according to Islamabad, they found safe havens. Pakistan claims that attacks against its security forces are being planned from across the border. Authorities in Kabul reject these accusations. Afghan officials say that TTP is an internal problem for Pakistan and that Afghanistan bears no responsibility for its activities. These opposing positions have become one of the central sources of tension between the two countries. With each new attack, pressure on the Pakistani leadership increased, and eventually, this issue became one of the main triggers that pushed the conflict beyond diplomatic disputes and toward military confrontation. For decades, Pakistan tried to shape the situation inside Afghanistan. The main goal of this policy was simple: to ensure that a friendly government remained in Kabul. This approach became known as the strategy of strategic depth. Pakistani military planners believed that an allied regime in Afghanistan would make the country more secure in the event of a conflict with India. Supporting various armed groups inside Afghanistan was seen as a way to influence political developments in the neighboring state. But over time, the situation began to evolve differently from what strategists in Islamabad had expected. Some radical movements that initially operated within the Afghan conflicts gradually developed into independent structures. One of these groups was Tehrik-e Taliban Pakistan. Unlike the Afghan Taliban, this organization directed its actions against Pakistan itself. As a result, the country found itself in a paradoxical situation. Groups that had emerged during regional conflicts and were ideologically close to the Afghan Taliban were now carrying out armed attacks against the Pakistani state. This dynamic became one of the reasons why relations between Kabul and Islamabad began to deteriorate rapidly. But security is not the only factor driving tensions between the two countries. There is another issue, one that is less about armies and more about people. One of the most sensitive issues between Afghanistan and Pakistan remains the question of refugees. For decades, Pakistan hosted millions of Afghans who fled their country because of war and instability. According to various estimates, millions of Afghan citizens lived in Pakistan. Some had official refugee status. Many others lived in the country without documents. But in recent years, the situation has begun to change sharply. Pakistani authorities announced a program aimed at returning Afghan citizens to their homeland. As part of this policy, large-scale deportations began targeting people who did not have legal residency status. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans were forced to leave Pakistan and return to Afghanistan. For Kabul, this created a serious challenge. Afghanistan's economy is already facing a deep crisis, and the sudden arrival of large numbers of people puts additional pressure on the country's limited resources. In Afghanistan, these actions are often viewed as a form of political pressure from Pakistan. In Islamabad, however, officials insist that the policy is about internal migration management and national security. But against the background of already existing disagreements, the refugee issue has only added more tension to relations between the two states. At the same time, another important geopolitical shift is unfolding in the region. And it is this shift that is causing particular concern in Pakistan. Relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan are complicated by another important factor: the role of India. For decades, India and Pakistan have remained strategic rivals in South Asia. Because of this rivalry, any diplomatic or economic contact between Kabul and New Delhi immediately raises concern in Islamabad. After the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, many observers expected the country to become heavily dependent on Pakistan. But events began to unfold differently. In recent years, Afghan authorities have started looking for new diplomatic and economic partnerships. One of these directions has been India. During diplomatic meetings, representatives from Afghanistan and India discussed cooperation in trade, humanitarian assistance, and infrastructure projects. For Kabul, this approach offers a way to diversify foreign relations and reduce dependence on a single neighbor. For Pakistan, however, these developments appear far more concerning. Leaders in Islamabad fear that stronger ties between Afghanistan and India could create additional strategic pressure along Pakistan's western border. As a result, the conflict between Kabul and Islamabad is no longer just a bilateral dispute. It has become part of a wider geopolitical competition in the region. For this reason, many analysts believe that the current escalation could have consequences far beyond the border between the two countries.